Yeah, this is awesome. We got a great group here.
Excellent.
So I'm gonna continue to let people come in. I just had a couple notes, and I guess I'll introduce myself first. I'm Peter. I work with Simon at Balin Development, and I'm just helping him connect with all you guys and helping him run the dental developer group, which has been a lot of fun. This is our time to network, to ask Simon questions. We have Greg Dickerson, my mentor, Simon's mentor, coming on in 15 minutes. So Simon, I had a note that if people have any burning questions, now's the time to start thinking about them. Put them in the chat, because Greg's going to come on and can answer some of those questions. So Simon, with that, can you just introduce yourself to everyone?
Definitely. So my name's Simon Balin. I am an endodontist by schooling, and now spend most of my time on the real estate side and real estate development. So my wife and I, my wife's a pediatric dentist. She's here in the room as well. It's Mona. You want to wave? She helps as well on the development side. So we both went to dental school together and opened our first office. After opening our first office, we opened a construction company. Just had a little bit of fun building the first office, didn't want to go through the same fun again, and started building dental offices for our colleagues. And that kind of just snowballed into a full construction company. And the next step from there just made sense, which is where we always thought we would go, is develop real estate. I didn't know a tremendous amount about developing real estate. Building it wasn't an issue, but actually going through the process of getting properties entitled and all the nuts and bolts of actually turning dirt into buildings, I needed a mentor. So I teamed up with Greg Dickerson, who's going to join us at 8:15. I've been working with him for a couple of years. So he's developed about 300 million on his own. His students have developed, I think it's getting close to 3 billion at this point. But he's in all different areas of real estate, not just real estate development. He does help a lot of his students, like Viking Capital, Vikram's in our group, purchase existing assets, and as well as he knows a lot about the dental and medical space. So it actually amazed me the first time I spoke to him how much he actually knew about DSOs and exits of practice and things of that nature. So we've been working together for a while, and at this point, I have just over 50 million in development that's about shovel ready. Another 20 million that's come on within the last few weeks, and we're actually looking at another project which could bring about another 80 million in development for the next year. So it's kind of snowballed. It's been great, and we put together the group because I think it's manageable as real estate professionals and dental professionals. If this is something you want to do, we can help you through that process, and that's kind of the goal of the group. So the information's out there. We have a mastermind with Greg that we're on every Wednesday, but the way that Pete and I met, we actually are in the mastermind together. Pete reached out to me. He's in Maine. Most of my developments are in Mass and New Hampshire. We met up in January, and as of April, we have a project that's we start moving dirt. It's a 32 unit in Maine, and we have a couple other projects that we're looking at as well. So we thought we'd put this together. It'd be great if I thought we'd go around the room and do introductions, but it looks like 70 people have signed up, which I think is awesome. But maybe what we'll do is we'll use the chat for that. I'll let Pete speak a little
that's
bit.
what I was going to say. We have a lot of interest in this. So I wrote some questions kind of just to get us started. And I don't know if we could pick on Brandon a little bit, just to any burning question he has. But if people can, I guess, put in chat, I'd love to know where people are at. I mean, are you just getting into real estate investing, real estate development? Do you have a portfolio? I guess that's kind of the first question. I'd like to hear from people, and then, you know, if you do have any burning real estate questions for Greg or Simon as well, just put those into chat as well, and maybe we can kind of get the ball rolling. And if anyone's got anything burning they want to come on and talk about, by all means, go ahead and jump right in. Maybe we can pick on Brandon to jump on.
Hey, Peter. Hey, Simon.
Brandon, how you doing?
I'm good. So I'm I started talking to you guys a little bit through Facebook and stuff like that. I kind of saw the stuff that Simon was doing. So I'm a 27-year-old dentist. I'm about I'd be about 8 months out of school now. I purchased my first practice. Oops, sorry about that. Sorry about that. So I purchased my first practice 2 months ago. So right now, a lot of my time and focus has been on that, but I don't have a portfolio yet. The last week I've been cold calling apartment owners basically in the small rural town that I'm practicing in and trying to get rolling with that. So one of my biggest questions that I kind of have for you, Simon, right away is, what has been most important for you starting out? I know you kind of had a construction background, stuck on like being I don't have much of a net worth, right? That like I need a lot of capital to go ahead and do this. And I feel like, talking to you and Greg and other people is like, that's not necessarily the case.
So yeah, I think that's a great question. So most developers, and I think if you speak to Greg, he'll say either if you're starting out or he's actually still convincing me as I go to other markets, you do not have to have a construction company if you want to be a developer. And you'll hear him say it's about leadership, motivating your team and delegating. You can have general contractors build your properties for you, and there's still enough left there so you can profit on the deals. In terms of raising capital, it's funny. You can get into a smaller deal. You hear a lot of people going into fix and flips of a single family home. The amount of time and effort you're going to put into a single family home or a smaller property, and he can speak to some of this because he has some smaller properties, is going to be the same amount of time and effort as it takes to put together a team and get lending for a large deal. So I've got a 240, if you check on my website, you can get into larger deals like that with very, very little capital out of your own pocket. That deal in particular, we're in New England, and specifically that project is in New Hampshire. It was actually on the news this morning. We have a 0.5% vacancy rate in the entire state. So right now it's easy to get funds on that project. For example, the 240 unit, we got a $3 million grant for this current phase that we're building. We got a $3 million grant for the phase before that. We sold some tax credits. It's through LIHTC, which is low income tax credits. There are different ways to get into different deals without bringing a lot of your own money to the table. Or you piggyback on somebody else's deal for the first one. You come in either as a general partner or as limited partner, and then the next deal you have a little bit of knowledge, you gain some experience, and then you can take the next deal out on your own.
And I guess to piggyback off that, what made you decide to go into development versus just acquiring and value add properties and kind of going that route?
Perfect question. So that's actually it was on top of my list of what we do and why we do that. So you have value add or turnkey, or you have development in the space that I'm looking to be in. I want to be 200 doors and above, even more specific, 240 and above, which is why that property is 240. Because when you exit those, you're going to be selling it to an institutional buyer rather than just a mom and pop. So you're going to get a better deal on the sale and exit. So in this area, finding something that's value add, either the buildings are very, very old, or if they're not old, you have a lot of competition. Anybody can go to a bank and get a loan on an existing asset. Land is very difficult to sell. And if you can put together the deal, taking it from land to a building, there's a lot more upside in that than buying value add. And turnkey in this area is just absolutely outrageous. People are buying turnkey at a loss. They're expecting to find their returns or their gains and appreciation. And I won't do that. Greg wouldn't let you get into anything like that. It has to cash flow from day one. If it's going to be negative for the first 3, 4, 5 years, I won't even look at the deal.
Simon, can I piggyback on that a little bit?
Absolutely.
I text Simon. I'm like, hey, I'm going to deal with this issue at an apartment. I've got 20 units, and a lot of them are older housing stock. And I think it's property management. Smaller property management companies, sometimes you're still dealing with the property manager. You're managing the property manager. I hear that a lot. And also, it's finding real estate deals, especially when you're going on the MLS and you're not going off market and you don't have an off market system. It's so tough. And I feel like not as many people are it's just less competition. Is that fair to say, Simon, in development? It's more text, it's more, you gotta be a little more savvy to do it. You gotta have information that's maybe not as readily available as the real estate investing side.
I agree 100%. So you can lose your shirt if you do not have the right information. So you better team up with somebody who can provide that information. But if you know what your numbers are, if you know what your construction costs are going to be, there's a lot less competition to turn dirt into units to rent out. And then what Pete mentioned in regards to management, for that 240, for example, it was done in phases. That was the town's requirement. So the first phase was 4 buildings and it's 24 units per building. So figure about 100 units. It was a little bit under. When you're under 100 units, the management companies that you get are not nearly as decent as when you get to about 150 units and above. At the 150 unit and above mark, the management companies, you never need to babysit them. So we meet with them quarterly, and that's my preference. If you're looking to have this as something on the side for dentistry and you're continuing in the dental field, you don't want this to add stress to your life. It needs to be something that reduces stress and absolutely doesn't add stress. So when you have a 5 unit or 10 unit, you're still going to be managing that management company, and they're not going to be on site all the time. When you get to 150 doors plus, you could have an on-site manager, you could have on-site handyman. So you don't get phone calls. You kind of guide them. If it's above $1,000, you need to call me. But if it's below, I don't want a phone call. So I don't know any of my tenants. I think Pete, you know your tenants, right?
Yes, I do in-house property management.
Yeah. So I kind of don't. I don't want to know my tenants. That's not something I'm looking to do on a day-to-day basis. Receive 240 phone calls. You don't want that.
Great. Yes, whoever's going to jump in, go for it.
I was just going to ask you about that management. So when you get to that level of the 150 units or so, you have on-site management, but is it still technically a third-party company?
For me right now, it is. I think after we get to about 1,000, maybe 1,500 units, we'll open our own management company to manage our own assets. But even at that point, I would want to lead them to the point where I don't want to deal with that on a daily basis.
Okay.
But right now for us, it's a third party. And look who has just joined us. So I guess I will do an intro if you guys don't mind. Pete, are we getting questions in the chat?
People are being a little quiet. I know we got a lot of people here. I don't know if dental professionals are a little shy.
Guys, don't be shy.
Yeah, please don't be shy, guys. Throw your questions in the chat. Hop on like Brandon did. I know we got Josh here. I'm sure Josh will jump on at any moment as well. And we got Greg. So yeah, just let us know where you're at. I mean, if you have a portfolio or where you're trying to get to, and any burning questions that you might have for Simon or Greg. And with that, maybe Simon, maybe you can introduce Greg.
Definitely. So Greg Dickerson is here, and Greg has been my personal mentor for a couple of years now. A little history on Greg. I'll let him go into more details, but just how I came to find Greg was I was looking for mentorship in the development space, and I looked online, and sure enough, there was an online course on real estate development. So it wasn't that costly. My wife and I were in Florida at the time, and it was something I was able to download and watch on the plane ride back. And as soon as I think it was before we landed, I looked at my wife and I said, I need to figure out how to work with Greg one-on-one. And sure enough, when we landed, I found out that Greg does mentorship, and I signed up, and we've been working together ever since. So Greg's developed 250 million of his own developments. Knows a tremendous amount in terms of what we do on a daily basis in the dental field and our exits for all different types of physicians and dentists and optometrists. And he's helped many of his students. So the gentleman who wrote the best book on apartment syndication was one of Greg's students. Vikram from Viking Capital is one of Greg's students. So if you've heard any of these names, these are kind of guys who reach out to the dental group as well. And all of Greg's students together, I think, are getting to the point where it's about 3 billion that's been developed or purchased or flipped. So a great person to have, very down to earth guy, and just helps in any way he can.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. And, I'm assuming everybody on here are dental professionals, maybe some medical professionals in there as well. And just put in the chat real quick, if you are a dental professional, medical professional, just put yes. I want to see how many people on here are. And the reason I'm saying that, I work with a lot of medical and dental professionals all over the country, around the world. I've got people outside the United States that I'm coaching in real estate development and building. I've got people in the United Arab Emirates. I have people in Canada, people in one guy in New Zealand. So, the fundamentals are same all around the country. So yeah, pretty much everybody's saying yes. So here's the thing. So number one, I started with nothing. I didn't go to college. I went in the Navy right out of high school, started with absolutely nothing. I learned it all the hard way. Started out swinging a hammer as a little remodeling handyman contractor. My first year I did 250,000 in revenues. I built that into a $30 million company, sold it. In 7 years, started 12 other companies along the way while I did that, and reinvested all the profits into real estate along the way. And the way I learned was, number one, educating myself. So I didn't go to college, but I'm very self-educated. So, I constantly pour into myself even to this day. So I never had any music on my, back in the day, it was, 8-track tapes, and then, Sony Walkmans, and then the CD players, disc players, and then the, 80 gig iPod. I still have my 80 gig iPod loaded with, all kinds of personal and professional development stuff. So anyways, that was me. I was always just pouring into myself, learning everything I could. But the biggest thing was I took action. And what happens with a lot of people, I'm sure there's a lot of people just starting out. And if you are, just say, hey, I'm just getting started out, so we can kind of see who's beginners here and haven't really done anything. The key is, and for those of you that have portfolios and they're already in the game, the key is to just get started. So for me, other than buying my first, couple of houses that I lived in, my first deal was a lot flip. A friend of mine who was a realtor brought this lot to me, and he said, hey, you put up the money. I'll take care of all the, contracts and everything. We can buy it. My dad has a client that'll buy it from us, and we can flip it. And we'll make, $30,000. So I put up 100 grand. He did everything else, and we split 30,000. And I thought that was just lighting the world on fire. So remember, this was back at the time when I was only doing probably maybe $1 million a year in business at the time, keeping 20% of that. So I was only making a couple $100 grand a year. So to me, that was a big deal. And we did it in 30 days. So, the light bulb started going off. So I just went on a tear and started just tying up land. So anytime I made money in my company, instead of, buying a car, or, doing a bunch of crazy stuff, I would take it and I would tie up land and, get some land positions. And then I would turn around and flip those lots to investors, and then build them investment properties, short-term rental properties down in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. These were multi-million-dollar, beach houses that I was building. And I'd never done anything like that up to that point. So what I did was I surrounded myself with people that were, better and smarter than me, that, were building the types of homes I wanted to build, that were doing the types of developments I wanted to do. People were coming down that were cashing out of the stock market and, making money in their companies. They were coming to the beach and buying properties and building houses. So I was selling them land and building houses for them. So I kind of learned from them along the way. So, all of you guys on here, are way ahead of the ball, the game, compared to where I was when I started out, back in 1997, when I started this entrepreneurial journey of mine. Because I had nothing. I didn't have any credit. I couldn't borrow any money. I sat down with bank after bank after bank. They wouldn't lend me a dime. I had to use credit cards, and I had to use cash flow from jobs to finance and fund and grow and scale my business, and, to do all the real estate deals that I was doing. So that $250 million was just me, my own money, using my own bank loans. All of the, businesses that I started just me as the investor doing equity capital. And, I've done hundreds of millions of deals with other investors as well, but that was my own personal, deals and holdings that I did. So, that's really it. And, I've got clients all around the world. One of them shared the other day in our mastermind group that they started with one house back in 2011. And now they're at, what is this? Okay. Now they're at 250 million in assets under management. They've got thousands of doors. They self-manage all their properties. They don't sell anything. And they've got a mixture of single families. They're getting into bigger multifamily, and they're also doing townhouse built for rent developments. I think they have a $25 million development going, similar to, what Simon's doing. So, the world is your oyster, and all you have to do is just start with one, start somewhere, and then build from there. And, if you want to grow and scale and build $1 billion portfolio, that's great. If you want to have 10 or 20 properties and just pay them off, that's great. So there are no rules. There's nothing that you can't do that you have to do. or anything like that. So, that's my story in a nutshell. And, hopefully that triggered some things and inspired some things. So, go ahead, and if anybody has a question, I'm here to just answer questions and just kind of help you guys any way I can.
Pete, I see you on with your wife. I know you've texted me a few times the last few weeks. Let's hear what you got. And I know Pete from dental school. He was actually in my wife's class, so 1 year behind me. And then by the time I decided to get my things together and go into residency, I think you're already teaching at Harvard, right?
Yeah, so double connections between the two of us.
There you
If
go.
you guys have questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. I'll try to keep up with it.
My wife actually has a question for you that she was thinking to ask. So
Sure. Hi, I'm Matilda, not a dentist. I'm an attorney. But a question about, when you're investing in a potentially large development, Simon, you were talking about, over 150 units. How do you mitigate risk in an investment like that, particularly in a volatile market, or if you're working with, a variety of different contractors where a variety of different things can go wrong? What do you do to sort of protect your investment, or do you just accept the risk?
Yeah, so real estate development, like anything, has risk. So number one, you need to understand the risk. You need to accurately calculate that risk, and you need to be able to withstand the hit if and when that risk happens. The biggest mistake investors make is they don't accurately calculate the risk, and they're usually not able to withstand the hit when it happens. So I went through 2008 and 9. I had about 40 million in construction loans out at the time, and I had permanent mortgage commitments on the back end. And I built all these things, and some commercial, some residential. And when they finished, I tried to move into permanent financing on those. The banks were collapsing and they wouldn't do the loans. So, I mean, how do you calculate that, right? I had $100,000 a month going out on interest payments, but I had cash flow and everything. So I had to work all those out. But, when you're doing development projects, number one, no matter what you're doing, you have to be the expert, right? So you need to know a little something about what you're doing. And then you surround yourself with a team who is obviously better and smarter than you, that has been doing what it is that you want to do for years and years and years. So the last thing you want to do is get into a development project like that with architects, engineers, consultants, environmental, utilities, all the different consultants you need that either don't have the experience, don't have a track record, or haven't done what you're doing. So whatever it is you're doing, find the appropriate professional that's what they do. Just like in the legal profession, you have specialties. So in the development business, if you want to do $1 million homes, you don't hire the guy that's building $200,000 homes. You get the guy that does $1 million homes, and vice versa. Because the guy that's doing $1 million homes, he can do $200,000 homes, but they ain't going to cost $200,000. They're going to cost $250,000. So you want to make sure if you're going to build, multifamily, buildings, you want to get somebody that's what they do. They're experts and they've been doing it. The only other, and then you build in, risk controls. So you want to make sure that you always, the biggest thing is it always takes longer, it always costs more, and a lot of times you make less. So you got to be okay with that. And you need to understand that that's part of the process. So you want to have deep pockets. It doesn't have to be yours, but somebody in your team has to have deep pockets so that you can handle those risks or those hits when they happen. And things are going to happen. But for the most part, as you go along, if you have the right team, you can mitigate a lot of that. Especially with good planning up front, good consultants, a good set of plans, and make sure that you've got, good building information systems on the front end so that you're, as organized as possible going into it and eliminate those mistakes. But right now you've got interest rate creep, you got cost creep, and you've got time that adds to the cost of the project. So those are the big things. So you just need to say, well, if I think it's going to take 20 million, I need to have an extra $1 million or $2 million and be ready and prepared to invest that if that's what happens. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it was a great answer. But one other thing that you taught me along the way was several points of exit along the path. So the land deal needed to make sense when Greg and I were going through our first deal. So you're not going to make it up further down the line. So if the land doesn't make sense, you think you're going to make it up in construction, that's not going to happen. So we looked at the land made sense. So we moved to the next step. And that was, do we develop the land and subdivide and get all the entitlements in place and sell that and exit and have a profit? I had some on that first development that Greg and I worked on. We actually had some offers at that point to exit, or you go to the next stage. You just do all the site work, all your horizontal construction, and exit at that point. And we knew what the value was, and the next point would be go to do the vertical. So not only do you want to make sure that all your costs are, I know on mine, whenever I'm underwriting something, I try to be as conservative as possible. If it's going to cost 180 square foot from what my contractors tell me, on my underwriting, I can put in $200 a square foot. So I'm always overestimating my costs and always underestimating what I think my rents are going to be.
Yeah, thank you for that. So multiple exit strategies. So our exit strategies were, we could flip the land with just, basic entitlements, no improvements. You could flip the land improved and sell pads or pieces or parcels. You could build and sell units. You could build and rent, sell a piece here or there, build a little bit, rent a little bit. So there were multiple exit strategies, but the number one thing in land development, real estate developer 101, you never close on the land until you get all of your permits, all of your entitlements, your approvals and your permits, no matter what. Never close on the land until you get it all, because you just never know what could happen. I'm working with, one of our clients is played for the New York Giants, played in the Super Bowl, and I'm helping him build his development company. And he had a piece of land that he owned in his family that we're doing a 54-unit multifamily ground up, his first project. And in the city of Wildwood in Florida, where this is, that's the Villages in Florida. There was a moratorium that they instituted for new development because they don't have enough water and sewer to service the new growth. He didn't know about it. We didn't know about it. Our engineers didn't know about it. And, that we found out about it right as we were going to submit permits. Well, we were fortunate. Well, number one, he owned the land, so it was in the family, so that they had no debt. But the fortunate thing was the way they did it there was we had already started the process of rezoning the property and getting it approved for what we wanted to do, annexation and rezoning. So that triggered the start of the process, put it in the pipeline so that we got ahead of the moratorium, where other jurisdictions would be, if you don't have a permit, they're gonna put a moratorium on those types of things. So those are some of the ways that you can really mitigate that. And the thing about real estate development is you're a master craftsman. So as a real estate developer, I'm an expert at all of the different assets, all of the different types of construction, all the different types of, whether it's value add, whether it's ground up, whether it's adaptive reuse, whether it's, opportunistic, whether it's, just core plus, that's what's really cool about being a real estate developer. You become a master craftsman at all of it. So you can really do anything. So you can be nimble. So those are some of the best ways. We've got some questions coming in.
Hey, Greg. We
Yeah.
got Paul who rose his hand. I think he wants to come on and ask a question, and then we have some in chat as well.
Okay.
Hello, you guys
Yeah,
hear me?
go ahead.
Hey guys, what's up? It's good to see Simon and Greg, Josh, some
Hey, Paul.
other people from the group. Good to see y'all. Yeah, so I guess one of my questions is some of y'all know I've been doing like single family homes, and when I look at a single family home listing or something like a potential deal, I know what my buy box is. I know how to kind of just instantly, it goes through a list of criteria that I need for it to fit in my buy box, right? So when you see a piece of land, so I'm, with development, I'm completely new to it. So when you see a piece of land for sale, or you drive by some sign that says this land is for sale, like some raw land, what is like what do you go through first in your head before, what is your quote unquote, I don't know if a buy box works in development, but what is that, list of things you go through in your head to determine if it's worth looking into, or if it's,
Yeah.
time
So
wasting?
generally, most developers are going to have a preferred type of asset that they want to develop, whether it's multifamily, commercial, self-storage, medical office, whatever it is. So generally, you're going to have a buy box if it's that, and there's going to be certain parcels that are going to be suitable for that. But if you're just looking for whatever, it starts with, highest and best use and what's allowed. So, you got to look at the zoning on the property. What are the allowable uses? Do you need to get it rezoned? Is there any annexation required? Do you have to get conditional use permits, special use permits, those types of things? And then you always want to think about highest and best use. What's missing? What are the demand drivers? What is that property going to be best suited for? Because not every use is right for every property, and not every property is right for every use. So those are the types of things that you need to think about. And the way that those things is you talk to, number one, just searching. Obviously on Google, you can kind of see what's around there and, kind of what's missing. Does it need a medical or dental office? Does it need a strip center with, the Starbucks and Chipotle and a hair cuttery and those types of things? Does it need self-storage? Does it, would a hotel work? So some types of uses are going to be more retail driven, where others are going to be more destination driven. Is it industrial? Is it residential? What's it surrounded by? Is it foot traffic, street traffic, demographics? All of those things come into play. So
Right.
generally, start with what you want to do first. But, that's when I'm looking at a piece of land, those are the basic things. And then you start looking at, topography, what type of utilities access is there? What does the traffic look like? Is there any intersection improvements that need to be done? Visibility, if you want to do a retail type of thing. So those are just, some of the high level basic things that you're going to want to take a look at when you're doing that. Now, if you're going to do like a hotel and it's 132 keys, well, I'm going to need at least a couple of acres probably. I'm going to need, demand drivers. It's going to need to be in these areas that people are going to want to come stay at a hotel.
Yeah.
If it's going to be a retail strip center, then there's going to be traffic counts, demographics. If you're doing a build to suit for a triple net like a Walgreens or CVS or something like that, they've got criteria that you can find on their websites that'll tell you what they look for. Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, all of that. That's a really good way to learn, is go to their websites, look up their real estate department and see what their criteria is. And that'll kind of give you an idea of what they look for in terms of, demographic and, criteria, size of land, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes I'll drive by, like I know I asked you about this. It was this random plot of land in Tyson's, and it was for sale. And I was like, there's so many buildings around this plot of land and no one's touching this plot of land. There must be some sort of red flag. There must be a reason why no one's building on it. And so it was just kind of tickling my brain a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of times that's price, that
Yeah.
they just have a huge number on it and just doesn't work. And, those are postage stamp lots there that you have to go vertical, and that's very expensive construction and very difficult to do and takes a certain type of investor. And, that Tyson's Corner area, office space is abundant, residential is not appropriate for every site. So, that's
Yeah.
probably what's going on there.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thanks.
So here's a question, Charles Key. In today's market and interest rates, what's the best place to start? So, like I said, the key is to just get started, pick, well, number one, you can pay anything you want. It needs to, depending on your goal, it needs to work. So you're going to reverse engineer that, back into your goal. So if you're going to, keep it and rent it, then, it has to cash flow. So you just work the numbers backwards. If you're going to build it and sell it, you got to make a profit. So you need to figure out, if I got to invest $500,000, it's going to cost me X to build it. I don't want to make, $100,000. The interest cost is going to be X, construction costs are going to be X, all that kind of stuff. So you basically reverse engineer the goal and just back into what you want to do. As far as profitability goes, across the board, short-term rentals are probably the most profitable in the right locations right now, but that's not super scalable, because it's one unit at a time. Commercial, medical, dental, those types of office buildings are pretty profitable. Multifamily, depending on what you get, where you get, those are difficult to make work right now because of the prices. So it really is up to you what you want to do there, but you can pay whatever you want as long as the deal works. So that's really the key, reverse engineer it.
Hey, Greg, can I just add one little thing that goes on what you're saying with Paul? Is a lesson I learned is, if a piece of land has been on the market for a while, there's usually a reason, and it might not be so obvious until you talk to the planning board and your civil engineer. It might be just a little sliver of land that is a right of way or some utility or something, just because you can go to a piece of land and be like, wow, this is great, so much opportunity here. But then you uncover these little things and say, okay, that's why this has been on the market for so long at this price.
Yeah, land's very nuanced, and it could be all kinds of things. Could have easements, could have, restrictions. The other big mistake people make too is they'll say, this land is zoned for 20 units an acre. So it's 10 acres, so I can do 200 units. Well, that doesn't always work, because you're going to have lot coverage requirements. You're going to have parking, stormwater, you're going to have gross floor area ratios you have to meet. So just because it's zoned for one thing doesn't mean that you're going to actually get it. And that's generally a rule of thumb, 18 to 20 units an acre for most multifamily. Sometimes you can get up higher than that if you go vertical, but general garden style, commercial, you can generally do about 10,000 square feet an acre. plus or minus, but that varies greatly. So there's little rules of thumb that you can kind of tap into. But yeah, I mean, if there's a good property in a great location and nobody snatched it up, there's going to be a reason, something. Most of the time it's price. A lot of times it could be, zoning or just, any number of things. Here's one here, says that we mentioned earlier about prefab buildings. How do you get those to cash flow? My math always puts them cash flow negative. Well, again, I don't know what that is you're talking about, whether it's residential, multifamily, or whatever, but prefab isn't always the cheapest route, but it can be quicker. I think I answered a Facebook post on that the other day. The problem with prefab is you generally have to put a lot of money up front, sometimes pay for the whole thing before you receive the unit. And so you want to make sure you've got a good manufacturer that, has a solid track record. I had a friend of mine that was doing several hotels back before the pandemic started, and he was doing modular, and the modular manufacturer went out of business, and he'd paid him, for half of all 3 of his buildings. So he lost, I don't know, $30–40 million just gone that he gave in deposits on these buildings. It might've been more, it might've been closer to 50. So you want to make sure you've got a good company, and then you want to make sure you got a good general contractor that does modular, because the modular company is going to set the building on your foundation on your site. So you still got to do site work, utilities, foundation, and all that. And that stuff has to be dialed in and tight. So, you just want to make sure that whatever it is, whether it's a house, whether it's, a building or, a big multifamily project, you've got a really good manufacturer and a really good team to be able to execute on that. But again, just reverse engineer it. And, numbers are what they are. And they're difficult to make work right now with interest rates jumping up as quick as they have, because, sellers and property owners haven't adjusted to the valuations that we need as investors and developers to make projects work.
Hey, Greg, just one quick thing before you jump in. And we got some great stuff in chat, but I just want to plug our Facebook group, Dental Developer, because I see like Lori's thing in chat and another chat from someone in DC. Even if you're not looking to be a developer, you just kind of want to understand it. I think our Facebook group is just, it's awesome for that. So I just recommend go to Facebook and check out Dental Developer, and it should pop right up. I just want to let everyone know to join that.
Yeah. So depending on the market, where will there be multifamily apartments oversupply? I read somewhere on Bigger Pockets that in hot markets like Austin, that rents may decrease and vacancies will be higher in the coming 2 to 3 years. What would be the best way to mitigate risk if market conditions worsen? So let me give you one thing on Bigger Pockets. Be careful on Bigger Pockets. There's a lot of people on there that have never done a deal, and they'll Google a question and they'll go just put an answer in, or they'll now use Chat GPT. So, be careful who you're engaging with on Bigger Pockets. There's some really credible people that are on there that when you go look at, ratings of all-time ratings, you'll see who some of the, top people are there, especially in the multifamily sector. But, real estate's hyper local. So every market's different. Right now, Austin's one of the markets that's correcting, but not everywhere in Austin. So every state, city, neighborhood, street and position on that street. I mean, that's how hyper local real estate is. So you could be getting $2,000 a month rent here, one street over, it's $1,500. So you really need to know your market, really need to know what's going on there. Arizona is another one, Phoenix. And I've got a client out there, and, he said the same thing. He said, there's areas in Phoenix and in Las Vegas where rents are just, nosediving. He said, there's other areas where you have a waiting list and you can charge whatever you want. So, you just really need to understand the nuances in the market. As far as housing goes, your big areas are Florida, Texas, Arizona, Vegas. That's where a lot of people during the pandemic just left the big cities and started going there. So they had a big influx. Some Midwestern states as well. I think Idaho is one of them. So some of those states like, Arizona, for some reason, Austin, Texas, housing prices are contracting, severely, but they were at distorted levels anyway. So they're still higher than they should be from a normal appreciation rate of housing. Even though rents are backing up in some markets, again, rents were at very distorted levels. So they're starting to back up a little bit in some areas. And where you're seeing a lot of distress too is in the cities with a lot of the tech companies that are, eliminating office space and requirement for back to work. There's a lot of office spaces vacant. So those people are moving and have moved. So the, rents are, under pressure in those areas a little bit to the downside. So it really depends on the areas, but nobody knows what's going to happen the next 2 to 3 years. There's a lot of multifamily development in the pipeline, but the markets we're in Florida, there's very low vacancy rates and waiting lists for especially new product out there. So you just got to be real careful, understand the market, understand the dynamics, and what you're looking for is positive net migration. You want more people moving in than are moving out, and those are the areas you want to be in. You want to be where there's very high vacancy or very low vacancy rates, where you've got good assets where that you can sustain your rents. But if we get into a bad situation and people are going to have to move, then rents will come under pressure. But typically, your nicer product, you don't have those problems. Class A, B plus.
Just to add to that, we're in New England, but most everything that Mona and I own is in New Hampshire. And I was actually on the news this morning. I sent it to Pete. I think it was even before 8 o'clock. I woke him up with that text. Maybe not woke him up, but the news story was where Nashville, for example, or the entire state is actually 0.05% vacancy, and Nashville is one of those towns. So there's Invest NH program, which is where we received a $3 million grant last year for phase 3 of one of my projects, but they just released another $100 million in grants for multifamily housing. The news story said they're 30,000 units short as it stands right now, but they do not expect in 10 years to be anywhere near where they need to be, because all the builders are pulling back. So they think in about 10 years, the number's going to get much worse. It's going to be 60,000 units short of where it needs to be. So maybe as a group, we can make up some of that deficit. In our Londonderry project, we have about 350 people. It is a workforce housing project, which is not Section 8 or anything like that. It's just if you make 80% or less than the income in that town, you get a discount on your rent. So that's how we were able to get some of those tax credits and get some of that grant money. And that's what this Invest NH program is about. But because of that, we have a brand new building with a bunch of units, and people want to get in there because the rates are reduced compared to what you could find in the area, and there's nothing available anyways. So we're placing people who've been on the list since we got our CO. So it's very market specific, like Greg mentioned.
Yeah, it is. But nationwide, we're underbuilt for housing. So right now, the NAHB and National Association of Realtors has come out that we couldn't build our way out of the demand in 5 years if we could build as many units as we need to build. So the construction industry, there's no help. Builders can't build enough units fast enough because there's such a labor shortage. Multifamily, same thing. There's so much demand because there's no houses, so people need to rent. And households are growing, but there's no inventory in most areas. Some areas you can't give houses away. Other areas, they're still getting multiple offers. Prices are going back up again. So it's really interesting times.
Definitely.
Here's one. How long are you keeping a piece of land under contract if you're going through the entitlement process? Isn't that sometimes 18 months plus? Yes. So every area is different. That project we're working on in Florida, he owned the land. We started 2 years ago with the annexation rezoning process, and we are now about 2 weeks away from building permits. So yeah, it's as long as it takes. And I've got sample contracts. Simon's got a sample contract that I helped him with on his. And what you do is you put the property under contract. You have an initial 90 to 120 day feasibility period. That's where you decide, is what I want to do feasible? Is it going to work? You vet kind of the low hanging stuff that you can vet in terms of utilities and things like that to see if you can somewhat build what you want to build. Then once you think that you can move forward, then you go into your due diligence period, which is verifying conditions, getting all your permits and your entitlements and approvals. You give yourself at least a year, depending on the jurisdiction. Could take longer, could be quicker, but at least a year in most areas. Some areas it could be 2 years, and you don't close till you get it. And I've got a very specific clause in the contract that details the time frame and how that works, and that you get extensions, and you have to keep this the seller updated on your progress, and you have to be making substantial progress. So you can't just tie it up and do nothing. So you have to prove that you're doing the work, that you're on the time frame that you said you were going to be on, and in order to get it closed. And if you don't, then they can kick you out of the deal, and you give them all your work product. So yeah, that's kind of how that goes.
So the first project that Greg and I worked on together, the previous developer It took him, he was working on it for about 8 years, and there was a historic cabin on the site that he wasn't able to get approved to have removed, and it's right in the center of the development. Greg and I had that approved for removal, but it took a year. But we didn't pay anything for the land during the time of getting the approvals. So there was 10,000 or maybe 15,000 of earnest money held with my attorney, but it didn't go hard until we had the approvals to remove that cabin. But I did pay for all the work product. So if we didn't move forward with the deal, the seller would receive all the money that I paid towards civil engineering. But we kept the property and we're moving forward with the construction. But almost a decade to get a historic cabin removed. So could take time.
Here's a question here. Arish asked a question about how do you get the money? So, you know, if I'm doing a $10 to $15 million project, $10 to $15 million project, and I'm very confident it will cash flow, how do I get the 20 to 25% down that the bank wants without using my own money? Can I use hard money? So no, you cannot use, well, I won't say you can't use it. Hard money lenders typically don't lend, you know, the down payment. Hard money is a little different thing. Typically, you're going to want to raise money with, you know, investors. So you'll have equity investors that will put up not only the down payment, but cover your fee as a developer. So you're going to put a developer's fee on the project, cover all your hard and soft costs, you know, all your out-of-pocket expenses and things like that. So you can bring on partner or partners that will invest that 20 to 25% down, which is your equity in the deal. And the lender's going to want to know where that's coming from, either you or your partners. They're just going to want to know. But, you know, you can raise that through private lenders. You can raise it through, you know, just people that want to partner with you on the deal. Number of ways to do it. You know, you can get the landowner to kick the land in and become, you know, equity in the deal. You know, the bank's still going to want something, even if the land, you know, satisfies that 20, 25%. They'd like to see, you know, some lenders like to see skin in the game. So that's how you do that. We got a lot of good questions coming in. Yeah, somebody said they saw 20 acres listed for over a year. Seems like prime stuff. Weird, there's still something off. Yeah, you just never know what the story is with stuff like that. Lending's getting harder if we pull our money. Can't we get some phenomenal deals right now? Yeah, so there's gonna be a lot of deals. So here's the thing, there's several $1 trillion worth of commercial debt that's coming due in the next 2 years. So a lot of deals were originated over the last 3 to 4 years at record high prices with record low interest rates on short-term interest-only loans, like 3 to 5 year interest-only loans, some of them with floating rate debt. So the lenders are triggering the due on sale clause for a lot of these loans because now they're upside down with their DSCR ratios. So they're calling capital from the investors. If the investors aren't willing to put more capital in, then, you know, the bank's going to want that asset back, or they're going to want that investor to sell it. So there's going to be a lot of assets coming up for sale here that are going to represent some pretty good deals in the commercial and multifamily sector, especially in office and especially in multifamily. A lot of these multifamily deals that were done over the last couple of years, they paid too much money and they put that short-term interest-only debt on them, and now their debt's doubled and they're way upside down. So what happens is the lender takes that asset back, and if the you know sponsor can't sell the asset, the lender will take it back. They'll sell the asset, wipes out all the equity investors, and then depending on, you know, the bad boy carve out, if it's a recourse or non-recourse loan, if it's recourse, they come after you potentially for the, you know, difference. If it's non-recourse, then they'll look to see if any kind of bad boy carve outs are triggered, and you know, they may pursue the sponsor in that case. So you always want to get non-recourse, and you always want to understand what the covenants are and what those bad boy carve outs are. Back in 2009, I had 2 friends that were 2 of the biggest developers in the Hampton Roads area. They were each billionaires, and they got wiped out completely because they guaranteed the debt and they put in their own equity. So never put in your own equity and guarantee the debt if you've got short-term interest. If you're doing long-term stuff, you know, that's fine, but they got wiped out. Thoughts on state housing authority developments or government housing? Since I'm close to DC, government subsidized rent like Section 8 seems to be pretty market resilient. Yeah, Section 8 can be good, but it's very different. And there's a lot of restrictions on like how much you can charge, how much you can increase rents every year, you know, things like that. But they can be very good. And it's not just in inner city areas. You know, a lot of that Section 8 is retirees as well, like Florida. there's a lot of Section 8 properties that, are, limited income occupants. So that, there's a lot of opportunities there, but it's, you just need to understand the rules. And there can be a lot of incentives on those types of properties as well. So those can be good. So what's the minimum amount of money that is needed to start in real estate development? So real estate development, like we said, requires deep pockets. It doesn't have to be yours, but somebody's got to have deep pockets on that team. And the bank's going to require that. So, it's really all relative. If you want to start a company, then, you've got your basic things that you have to do in terms of setting up a corporation, get your website up, things like that. The money required to do a project, you don't need any of your own money, but you need the money to get it done. So just to give you an idea, just the entitlement process alone can be, 100 to 300, like Simon's project, you probably spent about 300,000 on the entitlement process.
The civil engineer was 68-ish and the architects were about 120. So right there, 200,000.
Yeah. Plus, plus or minus. So the one that we're doing, the multifamily, is going to be, I guess it'll be about 250 to 3. And then you get into bigger developments and you can spend millions of dollars. So, that's all relative. So you got to spend that up front. The bank's not going to loan you that. So, you've got to come up with the money somehow to get all the entitlements and the permits done, and paid for before you ever start and break ground. All right, cool. I got through all the questions in the chat, it looks like. So anybody have anything else? Feel free to jump in.
Josh, you're back in the basement.
Yeah, per the usual. The wife's got all the cousins over too, so I'm kind of hiding. There's like 12 rugrats running around the house.
I was gonna say, I thought maybe it was actually a real thing where you stay down there all the time because it's always 1 o'clock on Wednesdays, but now we're not at 1 o'clock. It's not Wednesday.
This is where I live, under the stairs, like Harry Potter. I would just like to know, to emphasize what you guys said there. I think, was it Paul asked a really good question? Like, you drive by a piece of land, right? And then where do you go from there? I mean, what Greg and Simon said, and Peter is like you try to envision what could be there, and then you look at the zoning. And if it matches your vision, you could be good to go. And so that's what I typically do to start with. And then if the land and the zoning match, then I go to my engineering group. I just looked at a piece of land this week. It seemed like some nice apartment land. And I called my engineer. He's like, yeah, it's zoned for apartments, but it's in a flood zone. So you're probably looking at like 2 years. They're trying to remove the flood zone, but it's still like 2 years out. So just know you're not doing anything with that property for 2 years, right? Like those little pieces of information, you find out hopefully quick, and then you can make better decisions. So anything we can do to be helpful. This is a lot of fun. Real estate developing. I love it. I love building stuff. I just love creating things, right? So, I think who was it that asked about, Brandon maybe asked about why not do like value add. Yeah, value add's great, and that's probably the most popular thing you see folks doing is value add multifamily. But you also got to find out what excites you and what you're passionate about, and if it's building things and creating, developments, could be a good fit for you. So anyways, thanks.
Yeah, we got a couple of
everybody.
Good questions coming in, but on that flood zone thing, so that can be a really good place. So you can get, FEMA map amendments that you can apply for. So a lot of times that can create an opportunity. So if it's a property or a building that's in a flood zone and you want to develop it, generally you can get a discount because it's in a flood zone, and then you take the risk of, paying for what you need to do to get that FEMA map amendment. And it takes a couple of years, but if you can get it, then, that can be a really good play, for something like that.
This is awesome, Greg. So the rules of the game are pretty much the same everywhere, the same model. So what Greg's saying is, this was a home flipper, a wholesaler, is the one that was trying to sell this to me, and they didn't have a clue that it was in a flood zone, right? So now that they know, once they get confirmation on that, now I can say, okay, instead of paying you 350 grand like you were hoping, I'll just pay you what you paid on it, whatever, 170 grand. And then I need to just hold those carrying costs, right, for the next couple of years, just buy it with cash and hold it. So great point, Greg.
Yeah, one of the best skill sets you can develop as a developer is understanding the code and understanding what you can and can't do, and really digging into it when it comes to wetlands, flood zones, things like that. I mean, you can lift buildings up, you can, adjust, levels, you can appeal stuff. There's all kinds of things that you can do. So you really want to get, intimately familiar with the codes and the markets and the areas with the types of things that you're doing. And that's where your real opportunities are created. Like one of my, gifts in development is maximizing property. I've been able to do things with property, get more density, more lots, more square footage, more units than most other people, because I take the time to dig into the code and question things. So always be curious, always question. If somebody says, well, all you can do is this. Well, how do we know that? Why is that, if this driveway has to go this way, why is that the only way that has to go? So, I always try to get, and that's where engineers can be really good too. They're creative. They can be quirky because they're creatives, but, you always want to kind of make sure that, you're questioning all the assumptions in terms of the requirements and what people are telling you. Ask to see the code. If somebody says, well, all you can do is this, well, can you reference the code so I can read that? I'd love to learn and go through that and look at it.
I think that was a great
buying
point.
land. Go ahead.
I was going to say that was a great point in regards to looking at the land and why does the road need to be a certain way. The first project Greg and I worked on together, the seller already started working with a civil engineer, and there was a road going through ledge, and just one conversation, Greg took a look at what was available before our phone call. He looked at Google Earth and saw there was some landlocked land to the right of my project. And first comment Greg made is, I know this is the design, this is what somebody else paid for, but let's move this road, get it away from the ledge, buy that lot next door. And sure enough, just following those few little steps, Greg's advice, it was over $3 million savings in the land costs. I'm sorry, in site costs for our construction, and it got us 10 more units on the property. So you really have to go in with an open mind. Don't just think because somebody said it's going to be 20 units, it could only be 20 units, or that a road needs to go a specific way, that's the only way that it can go. The property now looks a heck of a lot better than the original design. We saved a tremendous amount, and we got more units. So tremendous value out there.
Yeah. I guess it was a retaining wall that you would have had to build, and
Yeah.
it would have been about $3 million. So saved you 3 million, made you 3 million plus the extra units. So those are the types of things that you always want to think about. Why do I have to do this? What are my limitations? And think outside those limitations. So here's one: thoughts on buying land in an upcoming area, 3 acres, and holding 10 to 15 years. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, land banking is a great play. Some of the most successful, people that I know in the game have done exactly that. They go in the path of growth and just buy land up. One of the biggest landowners in my area started out that way. He just bought a piece of land here, and he's one of the largest landowners in the area. And I was just asking, well, how'd you get all this stuff over 40 years? He said, well, I didn't have any system. He said, I bought this land here. And he said, well, I figured if I bought that, I might as well buy this. And he said, then the word got out, and if people needed money, they would come to him and they would start selling him land. Say, hey, I heard you bought Mr. Jones' land over here. I'm Mr. Smith. I live next door. You want to buy mine? So he just accumulated, over 40 years, hundreds and hundreds of acres. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And, he did develop some things, a hotel and a Walmart, and did some buildings for the government along the way as well. But, his main thing was land banking. I got another guy that was down in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. He bought land back there 50 years ago when you just bought oceanfront property by the mile. And he bought, 30 miles worth of oceanfront property and just developed it out over the years and made hundreds of millions of dollars doing it. That's all he did. He didn't do anything else. So he just did land and sold lots. He didn't even build anything. So that could be an excellent play in the right areas. So don't go buy farmland in the middle of nowhere unless you can lease it, but you want to make sure it's in the right areas. So I only have experience active real estate investing. How would you recommend someone like me get started in development? So, education first. You got to educate yourself, and then start with what's accessible to you. Easiest thing to start with is a spec house or a rental house. Build to rent. You can do a duplex, a quad, 5-unit. Multifamily gets a little bit more complicated, but it depends on what your resources are financially. You can fill the education gap in with your team. So I would start with what you can based on your financial ability to do a deal. So a spec house is very easy to start with. You can sell it, you can rent it, a lot of multiple exits. Above that, medical and dental, you're in the business, you understand it. You can build your own practice, build one for somebody else, put another operator in there, build a strip center like Josh. I believe that was your first development, right? Was a multidiscipline strip center.
That was my first ground up. Yep. I
Yeah.
knew dental. And so I very much understood what it was like to be a tenant in a retail building and what I wanted. And so working with my local team, it wasn't a huge jump to do a ground up because I had a great team and I understood being a tenant in a space like that.
Yeah, flood zones take longer inherently or red tape. Yeah, so flood zones, are just a limitation on the elevation of your building. So you can build in a flood zone, but the building has to be elevated and your insurance is going to be higher. So what I'm talking about is a map amendment with FEMA, and that takes a long time because yes, red tape. So that's basically what that boils down to, a lot of red tape, just like dealing with wetlands and the Army Corps of Engineers. But as far as building in a flood zone, you can build in a flood zone, but you have to have the first, floor of heated space has to be above the base flood level. So it's not that you can't do it. There's just rules, about it. And if you're near water, bodies of water, creeks, rivers, bays, estuaries, oceans, there's setbacks and, limitations, but flood zone is just, water levels, and you just have to be above it, so that's the biggest restriction there. And that's easily solved. Hesitant about developing duplexes in Southern California, crazy hard to find land. Or to find a developer to answer calls. Okay, so I guess a builder or whatever, not sure how committed they'd be for the project. Yeah, you just got to keep going and find the right ones. Everybody's busy right now. A lot of people are backlogged. When you say a developer, I don't know if you're talking about a builder, finding a builder. That was Mustafa. Yeah. I mean, builders are backed up right now, but there's other developers too that you could potentially partner with, not just builders, but, yeah, it's tough right now everywhere. Builders are backed up in a lot of areas. But the ways you find them is you talk to realtors, you drive around, see who's building stuff, talk to other developers, home builders association, that's where you find your builders. Okay. So for people that are looking to get into real estate as an investment, but not maybe looking to go the route of Simon or me or Josh, starting a construction or development company, what are the opportunities in this space for those looking to take a more passive role? So you can invest with, Simon and Josh, they have opportunities, probably some other people on here, Peter. So they have passive opportunities for you to invest with them. Something else too, if you haven't learned about it yet, so, from a tax standpoint, you want to get that real estate professional status if you can. If you can't, there's a short-term rental exclusion. So what the real estate professional status is all about, it's giving you the ability to offset your income with passive losses. Okay. Short-term rentals are not considered passive. So there's an exclusion. So you don't have to qualify as a real estate professional to get a passive loss or to get that loss from a short-term rental property. So you can own a short-term rental property and just manage the bookings and do accelerated depreciation and cost segregation study on that and offset your W-2 income. So, keep that in the back of your mind and go research that, short-term rental exclusion. That's a great way to help offset your W-2 income if you're not a real estate professional. And, other than that, if you invest in a deal passively, you can share in the depreciation, but all that's going to offset is the profit in that deal unless you're a real estate professional. You can't use it to offset your income. It's only going to offset, passive income that comes from that deal.
All right, awesome, Greg. We are coming up, we're past the hour, so thank you for that. Just to plug a couple things. Again, the dental developer Facebook group. I feel like everyone brought some great energy to this. We're really trying to build this dental developer group into something big. So if you could bring that energy and engagement to that as well. Follow us on Facebook, Balin Development. And also, of course, Greg, the Greg Dickerson Show on YouTube. Just Google it; it will come up. And Greg, can you plug your website as well? I think it's dickersoninternational.com.
GregDickerson.com. That's the easiest way. Yep, GregDickerson.com. And on that note, so development. My throat gets dry when I talk a lot. So development can be ground up. Development can be opportunistic, where you take an existing building, and it could be a warehouse, could be a school, could be an office building, and you turn it into something else, mixed use, commercial, multifamily, whatever. You can have one building and you add on to it. It can be a heavy lift value add. So even value add is a form of development, renovations. So development's not necessarily always ground up. There's a lot of different ways to do development. Sometimes, taking existing buildings in those urban cores and, gentrifying those, or doing adaptive reuse, or, mixed use are great ways to do development as well. So, in terms of growing the group from real estate development standpoint, it doesn't always mean ground up. It doesn't always mean buildings. You can do land as well. You can make a ton of money just, finding pieces of land, getting them entitled, just do the paper entitlements, and then flip that land to a builder or developer and make really good profits doing that kind of stuff. You can just do the, you can do the horizontal development and get them pad ready and flip pads. So there's a lot of different ways you can take advantage of opportunities in the development space. So it's not always just ground up. And then one more question. Here's a good one. Would you say it's worth syndicating and partnering for larger developments to keep yourself with smaller developments, but you own 100%? So when I started out, I did everything on my own, and that worked very well for me. My goal was to compound cash, and I was a merchant developer. I build and sell. I built to sell. So for me, that was my strategy. When you do syndicated deals, a lot of times you have to have a lot of pieces and a lot of partners in there, and by the time you divide it up, it may or may not make any sense. So you just got to do the math. So if you have an opportunity that you can do yourself, look at that. What is your return versus what's the velocity if you do one with a group of people that's really big? So for you as a sponsor, you have to make that decision yourself, and on those larger deals, because you're going to have to give up some equity to your partners and things like that, but you're going to get developer fees. So in a $50 million development deal, you're going to have a 3% developer fee. So you're going to have a $1.5 million developer fee along the way, which is your compensation, as well as equity in the deal. So you just have to run those numbers yourself. But all right, well, I'll leave that there. It's 9 o'clock, and let you guys, do your thing.
Hey, Greg, one more thing. Can you just leave us maybe on talking about the webinar that, and I'm going to put it into chat, that you and Simon are doing, and investing in turbulent times. Maybe just hit on that, and then this was, I think, a great first Pints and Properties, and we'll be doing this every month. We won't be lucky to have Greg on every one. He's a very busy guy, but we do thank you so much for this, and maybe just talk a little bit about what we're going to do on the webinar, and take us out.
Yeah, I wanted to be on this first one, help you guys get kicked off, and thank you guys for being here and listening to me go on. But so the other one's going to be very specific to investing in turbulent times, and what you need to do to protect yourself, not only in the business but all the way around from an economic standpoint. I study the economy, and I advise a lot of people on their investments, not just real estate. How do you protect yourself and your estate? How do you make a bunch of money, keep it, and grow it so that you can sustain for generations? But this is a very unique time. So I went through 2009. Like I said, I was in it hot and heavy in 2009. This is really my third cycle. I bought my first house in 1990, and that 90 to 95 was kind of weird. I went through the .com, bubble with everybody, and 2009. So this is a very unique time. There's some unique things that can happen, and things that we need to do. So it's going to be all about how do you find the right projects, how do you protect yourself in those projects, and how do you sustain and grow your wealth for generations to come. So that's what we're going to talk about on that webinar.
Excellent. Thank you again, Greg, so much for joining us. And as I mentioned, Greg is my mentor and was my mentor, and you can check his website. He does have courses on the website, and we do meet every Wednesday for a mastermind as well, and you can find out information about that as well. The mastermind has amazing people in there. Greg's there every Wednesday running it, but we have a few physicians, quite a few dentists, some people that just Samantha just does. She's a land broker. Football players. Just the groups. It's an interesting group. A lot of people, a lot of assets under management. Beyond this, Roshan and Nathan did kind of give us a little plug today. So I think, Greg, are you speaking at their event? They invite you or?
Yeah, they invited me to their live event, but I
Okay.
can't make that, but I am going to do a training for their group as well.
Okay. So Josh and I are speaking at that event that's live in September, I believe. So if you guys want to see us live, and then we are going to have an event on the East Coast as well. It's going to be a little bit more geared towards development, and we'd like to be able to do that to where we could actually view some of the developments currently under construction. So we'll try to do that probably around the October timeframe, and we're trying to get some room at Harvard. So we'll probably ask Pete to set up a room for us if you can. Anything else you want to add, Pete?
Hopefully they let me into Harvard.
Yeah.
Oh, just kidding. No, thank you all. This was great, and be on the lookout for the next one. And we'll see you in the Dental Developer Facebook group.
Yep. Y'all
Excellent.
have a great
Thank you,
evening.
everyone.
Thanks for having me.
All right,
Thank you so much, Greg.